2013. We started the scorecard back in 2013 and have completed 6 versions over that time. We are currently working on the 7th. So what the scorecard does, it's a report that ranks large US cities on their energy efficiency and renewable energy policy efforts. It's also increasingly focused on the extent to which considerations of equity are incorporated into the planning and program delivery. So in order to score cities, we get data directly from cities and utilities, and we use that information to develop scores across 5 policy areas. You see them in the middle of this slide here. So the first is local government operations. The second is community-wide initiatives. These are sort of cross-cutting policies. The third is buildings policies, then energy and water utility efforts, and transportation. So when the report is all said and done, we have a ranking and helps identify those who are really doing well, as well as those who have room for improvement. And cities can sort of dive in and get the beginnings of a roadmap by knowing where they scored well, where they didn't. But that ranking and scoring is really only the beginning of the value. By taking a deeper look at the metrics, it really can provide insights into how to gauge city program progress, which is, again, what I want to focus on. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to spend much time here, but Portland is one of the cities in the scorecard. So if you're interested in learning more about it, this slide gives the highest of high-level overviews, but we have a scoring sheet for Portland that you could get to by just clicking through on that link. Next, please. Okay, so now I want to really get into the meat of the presentation here in terms of how the scorecard is relevant. So before I begin, as a general note, everything I discuss and all of the slides that come after this are related to our 2021 City Scorecard, which is our most recent edition. Like I mentioned before, we're in the process of updating the report, and we expect to release it in Q1 of next year. So just don't be surprised if you see something different in a couple months related to City Scorecard. Just don't get confused. I just wanted to be transparent that if we do presentations on City Scorecard in 3 or 4 months, it might look a little different. So again, this is from 2021 City Scorecard, and what you see is a tree map displaying those 5 policy areas that I had on the previous slide. So you could see building policies at the top, transportation, community-wide initiatives, energy and water utilities, and local government operations, those 5 main areas in the report. And then it lists the categories of metrics within each of those policy areas. But the individual metrics we're assessing cities on are actually one level deeper than what you're seeing here. So there's actually more than 50 individual metrics in the City Scorecard. And to be honest, to go over all of them could be a little overwhelming to walk through, and it's definitely not the best use of 15 minutes of time. But I wanted to show you this so you just get a sense of the different areas we look at in the report. If there is, other than just those high-level policy areas, so we really have a sense for the categories and the types of programs we're looking at. If there's an area that you see on here that is particularly of interest, could be worthwhile to look through the report. We're happy to take questions about anything later. So now let's take a step back so I could give you a bit of a sense for the theory behind the metrics. So I wanted to start with this image here. It's from ACEEE's Ready to Go toolkit, which is linked to at the bottom of the slide here, but it shows a process for thinking through program development. So, starting at the top, you could see it begins, as you all know, with undertaking rigorous public engagement, community engagement. And after that engagement process, thinking through the multiple benefits of any program, from GHG reduction to energy burden reduction, so on and so forth, thinking about the data that you can collect to really help shape your program, and then setting goals and maintaining accountability. And from there, the cycle just continues on and on as folks work towards continuous improvement. But I wanted to just start with it because it relates to evaluation, because any program needs to start by having a goal, right? So a program needs to be working towards a specific outcome. So it relates to evaluation because it's really important to be intentional when it comes to evaluating a program, making sure that there are those goals that are set out at the beginning so that it really informs what you want to evaluate. Next slide, please. So next, I just want to dive into a few key questions here. So these are questions that ACEEE might ask ourselves when we're developing metrics for City Scorecard to assess a range of different policies, not any particular one. And I thought they might be helpful because I thought they could be similar to what you might think through when PCEF is thinking through programs. So I'll just walk through these quickly. So the first question at the top here, for the program or policy in question, did the process to design and implement it follow best practices, especially as it relates to equitable design? So really thinking about evaluation from a process perspective. Then the next thing we do is think about whether the policy or program, was it adopted? Or if it was a policy, was it adopted as envisioned? Or if it's a program, is it actively being administered? So this is sort of like a checkbox sort of thing, policy program creation. And then the last thing we think about are what are those outcomes associated with the program activities? And we think about this as policy performance. So looking at process evaluation as well as impact evaluation. Next slide, please. And this is where, yeah, it's a bit of a peek behind the scenes with how ACEEE approaches metrics, but we use a variety of metrics. After we ask those questions that were on the previous slide, we use a variety of metrics to try to assess cities on different types of programs. So this could be a program to a local government program to do retrofits in schools. It could be something that is in private buildings. It's something that really applies across the board. So the types of metrics fall into 4 buckets, but really the 3 that are in the deeper shade of orange there. So the first, we have a whole set of process metrics where, again, we're assessing the processes used in developing a policy or a program. Then we really think about that policy or program metric, assessing the adoption or creation of a policy, program, or plan, and then policy performance, assessing the results or progress of a, or how a program is really, what the outcomes are like. And then the shaded box here, I wanted to be thorough, so I wanted to list it. But when we talk about performance metrics, we talk about assessing metrics that may or may not be tied to a specific policy or program. So as an example, you could track energy burden citywide. That's not something ACEEE in its scorecard tracks because it can be more difficult to tie it to individual policies and programs. But again, I just wanted to be thorough. But this type of approach is something that could be helpful at PCEF as it thinks about evaluation, because it brings together these different ideas that are helpful to think about in terms of the process to develop a program, whether the program is actually developing as envisioned and stood up, and the performance of that program. Next slide, please. So I know walking through that theory and that process, can be a bit theoretical. So I wanted to apply it here. So to do that, I just wanted to take something that we look at the city scorecard, sets of metrics, and walk you through them. So I chose the way we look at climate plans and climate goal setting in the context of city scorecard, and I'm just sort of going to walk you through. So when we're looking at a climate goal, at the end of the day, what ACEEE wants to recognize is that cities have, 1, taken an equitable process in designing climate plans and the resulting goals. 2, they've set a high bar for emissions reductions, and 3, they're on track for receiving it, or achieving it rather. So that's what we're looking to gauge. And so what we have on this slide are some of the metrics that we actually use to determine whether that is the case. So just to walk you through this slide quickly, on the left, you have those categories of different types of metrics: process, policy, and policy performance. In the middle, you have sort of a guiding question as it relates to each of those categories. And then the last one is really some of the individual metrics that we look at. So on the process side, in the city scorecard, the question we ask and that we collect data from cities on is, did the city take an equity-driven approach to clean energy planning or an implementation and evaluation? And so the things we were specifically looking for, are there public engagement strategies with marginalized communities when a climate plan is being made or a goal is being developed? Is there a decision-making body that's available to approve and allocate funding as it relates to climate programs? Also, has equity accountability been institutionalized in city processes in some way? There's a lot of other things that could be looked at in terms of process, but again, it's just the idea of we're not focused on the endpoint. We're thinking about, were things done the right way in terms of creating this policy or program? So next we get to the policy metric side of things. So does the city have a climate mitigation goal? Is it stringent? This is sort of like that, a bit of that checkbox. So what are we looking at? One, the adoption of a goal. Has the city council adopted a goal? Has the mayor put out an executive order formalizing a climate goal, something like that? And then we also take it a little bit further by looking at whether it's stringent or not, because in our view, it's not just having a climate goal. Is it an ambitious one, right? Is it one that is really driving city action? And then moving to the last bucket here, policy performance. So we're looking to really figure out what progress is the city making towards its climate change mitigation goals. So here we ask the cities for actual information from their inventories on their GHG levels over time. And then we use that to do a simple model to figure out whether they are on track for their goals. So again, you can think about this approach from process to policy performance as really begin to embark on, what are the things that we should look at as part of an evaluation. Next slide, please. So here I wanted to sort of change it up a little bit and just walk quickly through some impact information we have from cities. This is another way the scorecard can be helpful. We collect a lot of information from cities, so I just wanted to walk you through. And so I'll do these next slides pretty quickly because I think I'm getting tight on time. But the first program I want to talk about was in Madison. So their Efficiency Navigator program, that's one that provides energy efficiency and renewable energy upgrades and naturally occurring affordable housing. So the program administrators there track a variety of metrics. So they obviously know the location of the property, but as well as that the neighborhood, the zip code, the census tract, and they use that to characterize the demographic and socioeconomic characteristics and understand who is really benefiting from the program. These program administrators determined it wasn't best to collect information on the individual or household level, as administrators thought it would be a barrier to participation. I included the link to the program here if folks want to dig in any more to it, but that's at the very bottom of the page. Next, please. So the next thing I wanted to talk about quickly here was Charlotte, North Carolina. They have their Renew program, which is a workforce development training program for HVAC and electrical trades with a focus on energy efficiency and renewable energy. Again, they have a variety of metrics that they use, understanding who went through the program, but information on core demographics, race, gender, and the geographic distribution of those participants. They release that information publicly. They report it to City Council, and I included a link there if you want to get a better feel for how Charlotte does that. And again, I included a link to the program if folks want to know a little bit more. Next slide, Roxana. So these next two slides I'll go through even quicker. So what I've been really focused on in this presentation is more the project level evaluation, a bit of the, or I think what you would call a project level, like an individual activity. But I also wanted to just flag some research that myself and a colleague did a couple of years back in 2018. We looked at a selection of large cities to really understand what they were doing to evaluate progress against their GHG goals. And so this zooms out a little bit in terms of a city really understanding how do all of its programs roll up to a bigger goal. So if you're interested in digging in more, you could take a look at that paper. But what this shows you is that there's different ways cities do that. There's some that take the approach that we did and the slide 2 or 3 ago, where we look at GHG inventories and we do modeling. But on the left side of the screen here, you could also see how some cities compile progress of individual programs and initiatives that were used to achieve that community-wide goal. So it's less quantitative and more qualitative. Sometimes cities report on all of their initiatives, sometimes a selection, but there's a lot of examples out there of cities who have set high-level goals and really thought through what are the ways to evaluate that larger portfolio and present that information. Next slide, please. So this is one I'll go through quickly as well, but these were the cities that were in that that study that I referred to on the previous slide. And just a couple quick takeaways: you could see cities both do the qualitative and the quantitative approach. And if there's any cities in here that you want to dig into more, it's all linked in that white paper. Next slide. So just a few thoughts to wrap up here. So for folks who are interested in the city scorecard, please take a look at it. It has a wealth of metrics that can serve as key performance indicators. We spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff. If there's anything in there that's helpful, please steal those metrics and use them for your own work. And then in terms of other thoughts here, again, as you consider program evaluation, I just encourage you to think about the goals that those programs are meant to achieve, because if you don't start there, then the evaluation isn't necessarily going to line up, or you won't necessarily be evaluating the right things. When you do get to evaluation, I would, again, just recommend that you think about a variety of metrics that touch on process, the creation of, and the performance. So you're really tracking a variety of metrics that really help you understand how that has functioned all along the way and not just focused on the impact. And then finally, cities love to share their lessons learned. That's why I had those last few slides there on a few programs. So whether it's those programs that I just showed or anything else that, if there's a city in the city scorecard that you've heard something about and you want to learn more about that program or how they do it, please let us know. ACEEE is always happy to facilitate connections. We have relationships with all 75 cities in our report, so always happy to refer folks as is helpful. And I think that, yeah, that's my last slide. So again, thank you for the invitation. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, happy to take them now or later.
Maybe I want to see if there's any immediate questions. What we were thinking is having, Dave, if you're able to stick around, and I don't know if you are, so I want to respect your time. We were going to have our PSU colleague present, and then I know we had some questions at the end, but I want to maybe just see, maybe I'm going to look your way here and see, are you able to stick with us?
Yes, I can stick around. Yeah, so don't feel free to stick to the agenda as set out, of course.
All right. Well, I'm looking around. I'm looking at. Okay, so let's roll to our colleague Diane, and then I think that way we can get sort of both sides of this. So Diane, thank you first, David, and then Diane, can you give are you ready to roll?
Yeah. Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Diane O'Day. I work for the Nonprofit Institute at Portland State University. Do I have any Vikings in the house? Am I the only one? I know
yeah, you do.
Excellent, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oh, Alicia's a Viking. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and deliver this quick presentation to you. I'm probably going to just keep it in this form just for efficiency's sake, because I don't know what's going to happen if I try to do view slideshow. But yeah, I'm here to talk to you today about essentially your role in the program evaluation process. I'm a learning mentor and instructor with the Nonprofit Institute at Portland State University, which is why I'm talking to you today. So I have this little schematic that I made. It's a little corny, but I wanted to kind of show the three types of the way we look at collaborators. So I kind of look at them as being three mutually interdependent kind of groups. So you have your stewards. So that's kind of what you all are. So it's your boards, your funders, your commissions. You have your partners, which are generally nonprofit organizations, government organizations, other organizations that you're working with. And finally, you have the beneficiaries of the program. So that could be community members, service recipients, and in this case, future generations. So how do collaborators fit into the program evaluation process? So like I said, you all are mostly stewards at this point. Stewards are primarily looking for the high level impact of their investment and are dependent on evaluation reports to monitor those impacts. So in other words, you all are dependent on the reporting that comes up through the partners you're working with. Partners are primarily concerned about the effectiveness of impact, and they are also tasked with having the capacity to collect the data properly. So in other words, they're looking more at that kind of middle ground impact, the direct impact, which we'll get into. And finally, the beneficiaries, so the service recipients, they're mostly concerned about the experiences that the program provides for them. And also they have concerns about the burdens put on them during the data collection process. So I just have some evaluation do's and don'ts that I prepared. I just focus primarily on the stewards and the partners for this presentation. But essentially, when you're a steward of the program evaluation process, you don't want to expect perfection. You also don't want to assume failure if a program if large-scale impacts are not immediately seen. So in other words, like if the climate crisis isn't solved in 1 year, you're not going to get upset about it, right? I know we're all reasonable people, but it's always good to remember that. Now, things that you should consider as your role, your current role, you should celebrate successes, even when they're small. You should also, this is big on equity, for equity considerations. I study social equity, so I just infuse that in everything. You want to encourage honest and direct feedback from the people who are on the front lines. So essentially the people who are delivering these programs. And you do want to make sure that you're updating your goals in light of new information. Now, for your partners should be involving you as stewards and beneficiaries in the process of developing the evaluation tools. They should also be ensuring that they incorporate feedback from the stewards and beneficiaries in the way that they carry out their evaluations. They should also be keeping you updated through periodic reports. So that is a clear expectation, right? Now, they should also, when it comes to don'ts, they shouldn't be just collaborating with folks when they need something or communicating something when it's too late. So in other words, if they're seeing that a desired impact is not being met or achieved through a certain program or process, they should feel empowered to communicate that to others. That way adjustments can be made. So when it comes to reporting equity, sorry, this is from an old thing, but when it comes to the evaluation process, this is the logic model example that I have for you. So first off, a lot of you may have seen logic models before. The traditional kind of logic model focuses more on, it's usually inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes. Now you'll notice that I have 3 types of outcomes. So Megan earlier was mentioning that there's like some middle stuff that's happening. There's some stuff that's more on the ground that you want to be looking at for the future. So the way we approach program evaluation is we look at outcomes in terms of 3 types of outcomes. So I'm just going to start from the far left for those of you who may not know what program evaluate or what a logic model is. So inputs, that's your funding, the staff members, any kind of resources that go into a program. Your activities are essentially what services were delivered or what activities were completed with that funding. Now, outputs, this is where a lot of people get confused. So a lot of people will see outputs as outcomes. So I reviewed your climate investment plan and I noticed that there's a lot of goals set and a lot of those goals are related to outputs. So what are outputs? Well, that'd be things like the quantity of people served, and I just have general examples here. The quantity of buildings updated, the number of businesses enrolled in a program. These are just general examples. Now, when you think about outcomes, so outcomes could also be framed as the overall impact of a program. So output is what you did, and then your outcomes are how are people impacted by that programming. So for your short-term outcomes, that's what we usually call an immediate outcome or an immediate impact. So it's the direct benefit of a service. It could be, so that's an example. So direct benefits that people experience because of a service. And also another example would be immediate improvement of a physical structure. So it's the immediate, the really tangible, visible kind of impact that you see from somebody. Now, when you move into other outcomes, such as intermediate outcomes, those are more longer lasting benefits that someone can achieve or that someone can experience from a program. So say someone did a training program in 2022, and now you want to know, okay, they learned all this stuff. So let's just bring this workshop, this training program example. So say when they did the training program, they immediately filled out a comment card saying, oh, you increased my knowledge here, you increased my knowledge there. But then you're curious about, well, how did that change their behavior? So the intermediate outcome would be looking at how did they turn the knowledge they gained a year prior into practice. So then you may want to look at following up with them and asking them, well, how have you been able to use this information? Another example I have is money saved over the course of like 1 to 5 years. So Megan gave some great examples of intermediate outcomes earlier, where Megan was listing how does this influence their, essentially when they're living in a place, how does this cool their apartment? So what kinds of bills essentially, like, and so I'm thinking in terms of money saved, like what kinds of money are people saving on energy bills? So stuff like that would be the intermediate outcomes. Now, long-term outcomes, they're not always visible. They're not always super tangible just by looking around and going, oh my gosh, this $1 million went into this program and now all this stuff's happening. So basically, when you're looking at longer term outcomes, you're looking at what I would call reasonable assumptions based on the aggregate of short-term and that should say intermediate, on short-term and intermediate impacts. So essentially making the case on how the impact, the outcomes that you are measuring, how those begin to add up and build to those longer term outcomes. So as we discussed earlier, right, future generations, you're not going to be measuring what this is doing for future generations right now because you can't measure them, but making a reasonable assumption about how it will help future generations is how you should be looking at this. So now it's my time to make a quick plug for our program evaluation certificate program. So we're currently recruiting applicants for our program evaluation certificate program, where we help people develop a shared understanding of program evaluation, what it is, how to do it, and we do a cohort style so everyone has a shared understanding of what that means. It's going to be running from January 2024 and it ends in June 2024. And we're also offering institutional registration. So we've had a lot of great success with folks who send people from a coalition together to do this, because it helps create a shared language, a shared report structure, a shared understanding of their role in program evaluation. So if you are interested in that, it also helps build capacity. Feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Tracy, given scheduling, and I'm just appreciating that we've got invited speakers, I'm wondering if we can do 5 minutes of questions for our speakers, both Diane and Dave, as well as Roxana, and then go for the break afterwards so we can at least let them off the hook from hanging with us after the break.
Sounds good. And that sounds like Dave is in New York. So 3 hours ahead.
I'm a night owl. It's okay. No worries. I don't want to speak for Roxana though.
Both of you are in New York?
Roxana's in, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm in Washington, D.C., so also 3 hours.
All right, we'll open it up at this time for questions. Ramphis?
Hey, appreciate you all taking the time to joining us in this meeting, and I'm starting to recognize just East Coast time versus West Coast time. So again, extremely appreciative for making the time. One, Dave, just in your slides on your last bullet point on takeaways, I think definitely would love an opportunity and definitely discussion with the committee, but just to learn from other cities. I think now with Colorado, Denver having their own similar PCEF program, I think it's really just great just to have a network of folks dealing with similar issues, challenges around program evaluation, and just the evolution of their respective programs, and just to learn from one another. And I think it's helpful just to get beyond our Portland exceptionalism. I'm also a victim of that. So, but I guess my question here is, I guess maybe a twofold question for each of you, but I don't know if either of you have recommendations. So one of the challenges I see with PCEF is, one, their PCEF has, Portland Clean Energy Fund has its own sort of goal, legislation and directive. And sometimes it's a little bit feels siloed, but also definitely part of the ecosystem of the city. You mentioned the city council, the mayor's initiatives, goals, goal settings. How do you reconcile, any recommendation how, a program like PCEF could evolve to sort of thinking about how you goal set together? I feel like taxpayers, general public, CS is one. Sometimes we think of ourselves as our own thing, but I feel like that's just a natural tension, if I can call that, not tension is a bad word, but just a natural tension within the program. So I know there's recommendations there. And then the second part question is just within the Portland Clean Energy Fund and its goals and directives, it's so big. Just to talk about workforce, it's so difficult. Workforce and energy efficiency and renewables. It's one thing to say, let's stay top level, but to stay top level on all those categories, it's it can be a very exhaustive exercise in of itself, good or bad. Not to say we shouldn't rise to the occasion, but I guess any recommendations there. I think it feels like a unique challenge to PCEF. It'd be great to know, hey, maybe it's not a unique challenge. I don't know if y'all have recommendations in terms of how do you just how do you compartmentalize those different goals within PCEF that it's as their own category can be just enough for one group.
So one thing that is important to note, which I didn't really note, but there are different types of evaluations that you can do. So you mentioned compartmentalization, and I think that's exactly it. So in terms of looking at this big document that's very nebulous, it'd be really important to figure out how can you section that out and what type of evaluation you would need for each. So there's 3 primary type of evaluations. There's one that looks at performance. So how well are you meeting the stated goals, which might be great for you all. There's also one related to process, which is what kinds of processes do we need to change based on what we're finding. And then the third one is more what you call summative, which is more, we're just going to list what the impacts of this program is. So I would personally recommend to whoever's carrying each of these out to develop a plan on how that particular section needs to be carried out, which is an entire process, right? But then it helps things go smoothly. In regards to your first question, I do think doing kind of that meta analysis of, are these the goals? Are these goals fitting? That could be something that you would also need to do, kind of a meta analysis, a meta evaluation of the actual plan as it's written. and how it's aligning with what's actually happening.
So I'm happy to jump in with some thoughts, but if you had any follow-ups for Diane. Okay, so I guess a few things from me. Yeah, on the first note, again, would be happy to connect you with cities. We work with Denver as an example, so would be happy to facilitate connections there with with the city or the committee that is being formed there. I can't say I'm up to speed on all of the details, but I know it's in the works. I can't remember the name, but would be happy to do that. Then in terms of what you were saying in terms of figuring out how to begin to evaluate something that could be sort of a monster program. I certainly understand that, having done the work on City Scorecard for the same time, we have this really ambitious goal to evaluate the entirety of a city's clean energy efforts. And that exercise, when we started doing it, was very overwhelming. And then I think there's a few ways to tackle it. Segmentation is one of them, as Diane was saying, but I think really mapping out what are the core components of the program, right? And figuring out how do those building blocks build up to that larger goal, and then based on that, figuring out how deep can you go? Because you could go all day in terms of metrics for every program, process, impact, but it comes down to, again, thinking about what your ultimate goal is, and then based on that goal, what level of details you need to get into. But I think it does start with doing a mapping of, what are the different program areas that PCEF is involved in, and then how did they roll up to that larger goal, and then begin working on it from there. And then in terms of another question you had, in terms of the goal to evaluate towards, you were mentioning the tension. The city has its own goals, PCEF has its own vision. I think that's more difficult for me to want to weigh in on, not knowing the local circumstances more, to be honest and transparent. But I think that's something that you do want to resolve sooner rather than later, just because you do want to, when you think about evaluation, you want to think about that ultimate goal, and think about what you want it to add up to. So, I just want to acknowledge that that's a tricky one. That being said, you can, programs have multiple goals. So when you're doing evaluation, you can, sort of analyze the synergies between what you want to do and what you're required to do, and think about whether there's implications in terms of metric setting. So again, it's harder to give a great answer in that one without knowing all the specifics, but yeah, that might be a place to start.
Well, yeah, thank you both. Yeah, I appreciate the responses. I think for any program that, as you're creating, and my hat's off always to PCEF staff. It's I think it's a growing program, and it feels iterative. And I think it's I think one of the things I heard here too is just as with the different programs, different goals, to give that ability for those program management. Maybe now I'm just inserting my own words here, but like to create their sort of what the goals or metrics would be, or what are the core elements, maybe to borrow some of your words, Dave, like that does seem pretty important, and maybe help sort of compartmentalize. Like I think when I think about like some of the high level evaluations around, like say just engagement, engagement with community, like it looks so different, in some ways from maybe renewable energy, our bucket there, or some of our broader buckets compared to workforce, like what meaningful engagement there, who's being engaged might be very different. So I think that's really helpful to think about. Anyway, I don't need to talk more, but appreciate your responses.
Sam, does anyone in the room have questions?
Maria has her hand up.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for your presentations. PCEF has heard lots of public comment and appetite around us obviously measuring more technical, rigorous things like reducing carbon emissions through our projects. And I think we've dug a lot into that and how we can go about that. What I'm interested in, though, are the other parts of PCEF around our guiding principles, particularly with justice and accountability. And I got to dig into some of your toolkits with AC, EE's, how to increase equity accountability in clean energy, and was happy to see participatory budgeting as one of those tools. I'm the resident PB participatory governance kind of geek here, and was interested in how both PSU and AC EEE would elevate measuring process and the impact on the people involved, and how we can sustain like the best outcomes around PCEF investing in people, and how we shift power through this work. So feel free to elevate what you've learned. And I'm interested in learning from other cities as well as, Oakland and Seattle too, who have included participatory budgeting in their municipal activities. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll start off with a few folks there. And I wish there was a colleague who was joining us right now, because my colleague Amanda Dewey has led our Leading with Equity initiative. And the document you cited was a product of that, where we convened 20 to 25 community-based organizations from around the country, as well as advocates, to really put their recommendations at the top in terms of what should be done, in terms of thinking about the processes. To be honest, that document that you have in front of you, I think is probably the most comprehensive document I can think of from ACEEE in terms of the different elements to think about ensuring that programs have equitable outcomes. So I don't know if I can add too much more than that, other than, just emphasizing again, it speaks to the importance of process evaluation in terms of making sure that equity is a core component of any program, and thinking about what are the processes that need to be in place in terms of the best practice, and ensuring that, as you do that process evaluation, those are being met, and really understanding what metrics need to be in there to ensure that the benefits are accruing to marginalized communities and those who most need those benefits. So, yeah, I don't think I could go into any more specifics on that, but I'm glad you found that document. That's probably the best one ACEEE has on the topic.
Okay. I'm looking in the room. We don't have hands up in the room, and I'm looking online, and I know we've shot past our break time. So I want to just first say thank you, Diane, thank you, Dave, and thank you, Roxana. This is just really helpful as we are continuing and starting to build out how we think about evaluation here, and the committee evaluating the program as we move into this next phase. So really just appreciate this, and want to also give you all back what remains of your nights, and thank you all. And I'm sure we'll gather questions from the committee as they come up and send them your way. But thank you all, and we'll, if it works, we'll take our break now, because I know that we're past, and then we'll come back a little bit. Can we give ourselves a 7-minute break? Come back at like 7:22. Okay.
Thank you all. Take care. My contact info is in the chat.
Thanks again for the invitation.
Thank you. We'll make sure it goes around. Just getting us eating here, because the food, we got food a little later. So I want to maybe just turn it back to committee members before we move on from evaluation and turn it over to our next presenter, Duranko's Blueprint Foundation, and see if we're going to continue coming back, and we'll work with Megan and Ramfis to figure out what the next steps are on discussing evaluation. But just want to give the space briefly back to committee members to see if there are any initial reflections that are coming up based on the two presentations, other things you'd like to see to help inform a further conversation on our approach to evaluation. Okay. All right. All right.
Sorry, this is Robin. Just a quick question. How does this all line up with the evaluation that is being done through the auditor's office?
Let me give me a second. Let me think about that. So the auditor's office did their evaluation on our program, back, through 2021 and early 2022. And as an independent body, they selected their audit their audit topic. And at that point, the focus was on the building out of the program. And did we have the systems in place? And so they took that particular lens. They're going to continue to do follow-ups on that audit as part of their process. That's what they do. They follow up and say, did our audit recommendations get, were they followed through? And we got a little bit of that follow-up, but I expect them to do a continued follow-up. They do not, they as an elected office, they choose what audits they do, what sort of evaluation they do into programs. What we expect is our performance evaluation that we've got to do per our code. Our follow-up will not happen by the auditor's office. It will be something we contract externally for. And we will work with them to help define the scope of that audit based on where we are and what's useful. And that's a conversation equally that's relevant. That's going to be important for the committee. As I say that, I want to also acknowledge the auditor's office is independent, and they could decide to come back and audit the program again and go through that process beyond just the follow-ups that they're doing to their original audit. So that's just, Robin, just to say that their relevant actor, their audit that they did and produced in 2022 met that obligation for us programmatically, but our next audit, our next performance evaluations are not necessarily, and I don't expect them to happen necessarily from the auditor's office, but as an independent body, they could come back and decide to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and turn things over for our next presenter. And so, Duran, I don't want to do it any ill justice, but we've given you co-sharing privileges so that you can present. But Duran Coles is a former executive director of Blueprint Foundation. We received 2 grants from us out of RFP number 1 to do workforce development related work. And we wanted to give this opportunity for Duran to speak to the work that they did in that grant and just share a bit about that, since that was one of our marquee grants in our first round. I've had the privilege of knowing Duran for a while and just value the space they occupy in terms of supporting the both conservation, environmental movement, and working with young adults, youth, and helping to diversify that and develop that exposure into these areas. So really excited to hear this, and I will turn it over to Duran.
Thanks, Sam. Everybody can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. So hi, everybody. Like Sam said, I am Duran Coles with the Blueprint Foundation. I'm here to tell you about Changes in the Air, a PCEF funded workforce development program. Uh-oh. When does I start my initiative? There we go. Sorry about that. So here's the outline of what I intend to share. First, I'll give a quick overview of our approach to developing the next generation of environmentalists and STEM professionals. Then I'll remind everyone of the links between climate change and air pollution, and do a little bit of finger pointing at city dwellers as an introduction to the problem we are solving through our work. I'm an engineer by training, so I like talking about challenges, but I like to quickly follow that up talking solutions. So I will highlight what's being done to reduce emissions before providing detail on what the CAP team has done to contribute to climate resilience. I'll end the presentation showing you what we have on our to-do list for the future. You'll receive a PDF of this presentation. I'm going to speak quickly so that you don't end up with a later evening. And so you'll receive a PDF of the presentation in case that's helpful for you to worry less about capturing notes. So let's get started. Blueprint Foundation's purpose is to connect Black youth to nature, each other, and training for careers helping the environment. We use the WISE model of student development which stems from work I did while at Oregon State University, and that work was on STEM identity development. In the WISE model, the W stands for witness, so we take students out. We often do this in affinity with all Black folks so that they can let go of the societal pressures that they have on them. We do mindfulness activities, and they really commune with nature, and we talk about our ancestral history of doing just that. And then we investigate issues. This is a student here at Leach Botanical Garden. We were doing macroinvertebrates that day, talking keystone species. And so the students investigate the issues associated with the spaces that hopefully they are growing to love. And then we get them to solve some of those issues. So on the left here, you see one of our students helping to restore a natural area. And on the right, our students weatherizing low-income housing. The E in WISE is educate. So to codify their knowledge, to get questions that make them think deeper about the challenges, we have them do teaching assignments. So they teach folks that are younger than them all about what they've learned. We really want the students to see themselves as the educator, the scientist, the engineer. So in addition to teaching assignments, we offer paid work opportunities for them to train and serve in these professional capacities. Changes in the Air is one such opportunity. The overarching goal of Change in the Air is to empower Black scientists to gather and analyze data for selecting and evaluating the impacts of climate solutions. Before I go into detail about how we do this, let's take a look at the program as a whole. Our coalition of scientists, engineers, educators, and advocates came together because we all recognize that climate change is an air pollution problem. We also believe climate solutions create environmental justice when the experiences and expertise of frontline and fence line community members are centered in, and included in the work. Because after all, they have firsthand knowledge of how our carbon-based infrastructure impacts air quality and human health. Our challenge is that we need hyperlocal data to prioritize and evaluate climate solutions and to give community members the information they need to keep themselves safe and advocate for environmental justice. To get this data, we chartered a coalition, developed curriculum based on community input, trained Black youth, and are now using iterations of the training program to build a network of monitors collecting air quality data. The data from these monitors will be stored and visualized in a data platform that is accessible to community members, industry, and government for a variety of purposes, all of which support climate resilience and healthy neighborhoods. I hope this diagram is helpful as a summary. Now I'd like to talk a few more details. So I previously stated that climate change is an air pollution problem, and we know what pollutants are at play. Black carbon is not a greenhouse gas, but it does have a warming impact greater than the well-known greenhouse gas carbon dioxide. And it comes from known sources. Ozone is a greenhouse gas that is created from other gases. And we also know what the sources of those gases are. These pollutants accelerate climate change and increase particulate matter from wildfires and pollen from unseasonably hot days. As we know, I'm a gardener, so other gardeners out there, you know, when it gets warm outside, plants are like, okay, it's my time to shine. And then it's time for everyone who is bothered by pollen to suffer. Right? So more of those days if we keep warming the planet. I love flowers, but not that much. Fossil fuel usage accounts for more than 75% of global greenhouse emissions and nearly 90% of all carbon dioxide emissions. If you want to know your contribution to climate change, measure the air quality around you. If you want to know the impacts of poor air quality on people, ask frontline and fence line community members who breathe the results of our carbon infrastructure daily. We showed this slide to students and community members in Justice 40 neighborhoods, and everyone has stories. That is data to share about these images. Sorry. Just a sec. Okay, everyone has stories because we all live around these sources of pollutants. And if you're BIPOC or low income, you are more likely to live in areas where the sources are prevalent, hence the term fence line communities. But before you feel down, remember I said we would talk problems and solutions. So here are the solutions. And they are at all levels of society that we need in order to make a significant difference. Community members are becoming more aware and active in advocacy. Jurisdictions are creating policies and programs like PCEF that provide resources for the strategies to happen. Industry is producing devices to measure air pollution like purple air monitors, like the monitors that we have our students build, and like QuantAQ monitors that we use through CAP. And CBOs like the Blueprint Foundation are helping to diversify the STEM workforce such that frontline and fence line community members contribute as experts. All of these contributions lead us to the outcomes we seek. So the cup is half full. There's a great many things happening, but are they the most impactful options? And are they being implemented in the correct places? We need climate solutions that address carbon emissions while reducing burden on frontline and fence line communities. Given that people and the planet are suffering today, we need the solutions to target locations most in need, using solutions that are confident, that we are confident in being high impact. Solutions that allow everyone to contribute to climate resilience through healthy day-to-day decision-making at the individual level, as well as the organizational and institutional levels of society. CAP supplies these data, and what you see on the screen is how we do it. Hopefully you've been perusing. I tried to give you a little bit more time on this one because it's got a lot of information on the slide. But essentially, this is our curriculum. We created a structure for gathering data that uses community questions and issues to train Black high school students in air science, policy advocacy, computer programming, data science, and microelectronics. The youth scientists learn beside technologists and near-peer college mentors, grappling with research questions, learning to code, building air quality monitors, and learning in the field how and where to place monitors for robust data collection. The youth also learn technical and analytical skills necessary to interpret the data we collect for their community members. The CAP curriculum is comprehensive, and the resulting products of the hands-on learning are cumulative. Each cohort of youth scientists builds and employs monitors that form a network of sensors supplying hyperlocal air quality data. Each cohort, by the way, we started with cohorts of 12, if I'm remembering. This year, we are doing 16. We currently have 10. We're onboarding 6 more students in January. And the idea is the image that you see there, that room, we want that room filled with students doing this work. We want to have enough work that we need at least 30 in each of our cohorts. So that's jumping ahead a little bit, sorry. I'll get back to my notes. The air quality data we collect will be housed on a community-owned data platform that is interactive, easy to use, free to use for public, and supported financially by industry and government stakeholders who would pay to use the data for decision-making and prioritizing climate solutions. The image you see on the right is an example of what one of these platforms look like. It's from the Puget Sound. CAP Coalition members have considered the potential challenges. Well, we've grappled with the potential challenges. And so I guess they're not potential challenges, they're just challenges. We use the charter to ensure we are inclusive and culturally responsive. We know that we must actively counter the biases and mistrust, a history of oppression and colonization instilled in ourselves, our organizations, and institutions. We invite our government partners to examine bureaucratic processes that slow progress, like permitting permits for installing monitors. And we recruit industry allies who are willing to minimize their impact as much as possible, rather than as much as is required by law. Consequently, the CAP process involves a great deal of outreach to community members, businesses, government reps, and public health advocates to raise awareness of the project, relieve fears, and get buy-in. The reaction to our efforts make us optimistic that we have a sustainable initiative. Multnomah County has contracted us to analyze baseline data for a wood stove changeout program and included us in their awarded EPA grant to collect and analyze data to measure impacts of neighborhood greening efforts. Community-based organizations who learned about what we do are also excited, particularly about expanding our monitors to study indoor air quality of homes in Justice 40 neighborhoods. Local schools are also interested in this expansion to monitoring indoor air. We have an interest survey out to recruit collaborators from STEM, health, and education industries. And we are developing one-pagers that advocates in these industries can use to get buy-in from supervisors to do things like sponsor monitors or install monitors on private property. We're also developing infographics for community members to understand why it's imperative that they pay attention to air quality and how to use air quality data to make healthy decisions and advocate for themselves. We really want to drive traffic to the data platform once it is up and running. Through these efforts, we anticipate great things from a more diverse workforce and science literate community to planning and implementation of climate solutions that lead to climate resilience and healthy neighborhoods. But we do not want to stop with success in Portland. I know this is PCEF and it's focused on Portland, but these issues are global. So we intend to package our approach, our process, and our curriculum for use in new areas of the Northwest and other regions of the country. And we've already begun talks to do that. Ultimately, change in the air is supporting a change in the air everywhere. And I'll take questions.
Sam, there are no questions right now online. Are there questions from folks? Oh, Ramfis. And then after Ramfis, we can go to individuals in the room. Ramfis, go ahead. All right, Sam, maybe Ramfis can't come off of mute. Oh, okay. I see you coming off of mute.
Oh. My apologies. It's my headphones. I just want to say I don't have much of a question. I just really appreciate the presentation. I recall, your application coming in like during the onset of the PCEF program, and just just appreciative of getting your update and so just thank you for this update. It was really great to hear from you and great to hear from the program. Thanks.
Thanks, Ramfis.
We've got Maria with a question here.
Thanks for your presentation. I really love a lot of the headings you used and the phrases. I feel like I want to borrow some of that when I talk about these things. Can you describe in more detail like what that data dashboard can look like and how people can use it in the most practical ways? Like what's the utility behind it for different types of users? I think it's really powerful to have data at our fingertips, but how do you see it being used to its fullest potential?
Yeah, we really hope that we don't know yet all of the ways that folks will end up using the data. But if I were to give a list starting at the individuals, I would say if I had asthma or if I had kids that had asthma, I would go to the site in the morning to check and see, hey, is it okay for my kid to go out and play outside all day today? Right. If I was a community advocate, I might go to the platform and look up the research questions that we have there. And if you click on a research question, you would get information. This is what you should be looking for. This is what the data means. This is how you can use it. And then they can be off to the races there. if I was a person living near industry and I noticed shifts in air quality and it seemed like it was on a regular schedule, then I would go to the site and look at the time series data and say, okay, it's very clear that there are spikes every day, and it's usually around 3 o'clock. And so now I have information that I can use to either go to that industry and say, hey, what's going on? Or go to government folks and say, hey, this is what's happening in my neighborhood. I'm focusing a lot on what the community would use it for, but that's me. But industry can also use this. So or government. So let's say Multnomah County wanted to install these heat pumps and wanted folks to stop using for their cooking gas cook stoves. And they're saying, this will improve the air quality. How do we know that that's going to happen? They would go to the site and use the data there to say, okay, here's the baseline. And then we did this program and this is how things have shifted. And I'm taking too much time answering one question. So I will go on if you'd like.
That's great. That's a lot of good examples, and I'm glad you focused on the community application of it. Thank you.
We've got a second question here from Megan.
Yeah, Duran, like the others, thanks for that sharing of your program and all the great work that's happening. Can you just remind us, I mean, I saw in that icon, you've collabed different funders. Can you remind us, you got 2 grants in the first RFP in the workforce development category, is that right? And then can you tell us a little bit, not the heavy details, but just how it works to bring PCEF money in with other money so we can understand how that is working. And then just a comment for all of us is, it's cool to see this as a workforce development project. It clearly has kind of broader community education and et cetera impacts, but considering I think we funded it in the workforce world, I would love, to our evaluation discussion earlier, one day to look back and be like, did these youth, did any of them go on to do careers in science, which would be amazing, or green energy or air quality monitoring, things like that. Yeah.
Well, we already have one student, actually the student that helped Multnomah County with analyzing data for the wood stove. Yes, the wood stove change out. That student now works for ODOT, and they are applying what they learned here, working with ODOT. So and I'm hoping that more of that is to come. As far as the funding is concerned, this changing the air, any air quality study is extremely expensive. And I mean, you're paying technologists, you are buying sensors that are $6,000 each. And so we can't really rely on one funding source, even though PCEF was very generous in awarding us. Once the prototype for the data platform was done, we were out of money, right? And so what we end up doing is piecing together various grants. We got a Department of Energy award, the Hero X Prize, and we are spending a lot of our time gathering more funds from other places, which is always time away from our students, right? So I think if there was anything feedback I would give to PCEF, I would say that when y'all change the reporting process, that table, it is so much better than when we first started. And so I think streamlining things like that is extremely helpful because we do have multiple sources of funds, and each funder wants a report, and the report is often similar, but not similar enough that we can use it for every funder. Hopefully that answers your question.
Well, Megan, did that answer your question before we move on?
Oh, yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. D'Angelo?
Yeah, I first, I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. I've been very aware of the Blueprint Foundation through the work that I did at Raymore and various founders that have been part of organizing the foundation. I've done a lot of work with workforce development and economic development, especially as it pertains to areas in which Black folks in particular have not had an opportunity to really be invested in and understand this space. In particular, digital infrastructure and, you know, actual physical infrastructure. Environmental infrastructure is another one that, you know, if not done properly and really given the opportunity to be involved in, that the world will move faster than we are allowed, move faster than we have time to catch up to understand what this really means for us and then actually participate. So to see something like this, especially as it pertains to environmental justice and really clean air, you know, impacts our communities a lot more than other communities. I'm really excited. I wasn't here for the first two grants that you received from PCEF, but I have heard things about them, and clearly they were very good things that came of them. So thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions in the room?
No, Tracy, there are not.
Okay, well, I'll turn it over to you for committee member recruitment.
Yeah, all right. Let me get my slide deck up. Duran, thank you so much. Just want to say that as well. Thank you. All right. Okay, let's get, okay. So folks, we're at that point again where you know, every so often we've got to go through recruitment and they take a while. And so we're back to you all. And this is to replace Michael Edenhill, who's not going to renew and move on to a second term as part of just different obligations he's taking on. So he's not with us tonight, not because of any of this, just because he's had quite a hectic day, but that's what we'll be talking about here. So just to get to it, you know, as you all start, as we talk about attributes of committee members, required is someone with demonstrated commitment to furthering the city's climate action goals and serving our priority populations. And then in this particular recruitment, given the hat that Michael wore, as we brought him in, it was having someone with significant demonstrated experience in commercial, renewable energy and energy efficiency field. And so that's the recruitment, and I think the simple ask here, it's fairly simple, is just making sure, one, we're going to roll out with this recruitment, assuming you all take action tonight to advance the selection, the recruitment process after the Thanksgiving holiday, to push this recruitment out. And the ask from you all would be support in getting the word out, recruiting candidates, and then ultimately having a few folks participate on a recommendation subcommittee. And so it's, you know, that's the ask, but I want to turn it over, see if there's any discussion before really seeing if there's a proposal to advance the both the recruitment, so we can go out and put that recruitment out there, and then also just to see whether at this point in this evening there's folks that have interest in participating on a recommendation or selection subcommittee. And this would be folks that'd be up to meet 3 to 4 times between January and March to review applications and then ultimately bring a recommendation to the full committee. So any questions?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Is that directed at me? Go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Thank you. The last round of recruitment, I kind of had some additional candidates that we might kind of said bring forward to the next recruitment. Do any of those other candidates apply here? I'm sorry, I don't remember the other candidates that. And maybe you don't answer that now because we don't know.
It's no, Robin. I just took a moment of pause. I think there may be one candidate that may meet the most. We'd have to go back and obviously double check. I think there may be one, but I'm going to gather in that sort of final pool of candidates that got down to that 7, 8. I don't think that there's more than one.
Okay.
Just a question about process, Sam. Are you looking for action to establish the committee, or did you first and then add committee members, or did you want to do that all as part of one motion?
I think it can be two. One is just directing us to advance with the solicitation, which we will do either, that would at least set us into motion on that work. And then the second would be getting a selection subcommittee. So that way, but I recognize that this is, folks may want to think about it. So that's something that we can always postpone to the next meeting as well. But better to have it now, but if folks are hedging or on the fence or thinking about their obligations, I think that's not a challenging one to do in our early January meeting. Maria.
I see the attributes up there. Michael also satisfied east of 82nd. Was that just a bonus for Michael, or are we looking at that as well?
These are always moving, I appreciate the question. No, we actually have now at least three committee members I know that live east of 82nd. So while Michael absolutely, we have to have at least 2 committee members east of 82nd. Michael's one of those individuals. We now have 3. But Michael is one of the 3. So not to say that we don't want someone east of 82nd. And I think, maybe I'll just name this for folks. Michael also as someone who's been active in the electrical union and moved through that has brought significant experience and perspective from the trades. And so I know that that's just something that I know we thought about when we realized that this was actually the spot that Michael was holding. But I just want to flag that, note that, particularly as we think about outreach and think about folks that bring multiple perspectives into their roles. But this is a discussion for you all in terms of whether there's anything else you all would want to see in the recruitment at this point. But at least this is the core elements that need to be part of the recruitments and are in those required attributes.
I just want to say what we're all thinking, I'm sure, which is, dang, we'll miss Michael. And too bad that he is rolling off. So I just wanted to give voice to what I imagine we're all thinking. And then, of course, I don't know if you need action. I wouldn't think you'd need action to move forward. But of course, you certainly have my support in moving action and filling this seat. And if you need a motion, I'm happy to make that motion. And that is not me quite yet volunteering to be on a subcommittee.
Ramphis?
Yeah, I'm also, happy to be ready for that motion as well, or second that motion. I think, the only thing I'd say for important consideration in addition to, I think, just commercial renewable or energy efficiency is just, public infrastructure. So like we talked about schools, but I think similar skill types of skilled trades are needed in that. So just I think Michael brought that as something, being someone who works, as employee of the county. So I just wanted to kind of just add that caveat, I think, just to be inclusive there. Additionally, I think in terms of like the recruitment committee, don't want to speak for folks who were part of that, but just want to recommend folks. I felt like during that time I think we used good use of committee time, try to be efficient, and try to be meaningful in how we got to interview each of the candidates. And I think we did a really great job. And so just want to give a recommendation to anyone to consider. This is a great area to step in. I'm happy to be a backup. As a coach, I do think it's kind of just important making sure, hey, we have a healthy number of committee members on this committee. So just wanted to share that.
Wasn't quite sure if that was a motion in a second, but I'm going to go ahead and be more formal about it and move that we direct staff to solicit applications for a new committee member and appoint those committee members at our next meeting.
Second.
I would second that.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, let's go around and just do the roll call then. Tracy, you want to start online with folks?
Okay, Ramfis,
Approve.
Faith,
I approve.
D'Angelo,
Approve.
Robin,
Approve.
Sam, turning it back to you.
Okay, Megan,
Approve.
Maria,
Approve.
Paul, approve. Okay, thank you all. We'll follow back with you all. We'll see that recruitment and then we'll just poke folks in, tease out their interest in coming back in January and finding a few folks that can serve on a selection or recommendation subcommittee.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on that part. Are you like, do those people need to be formed for you to get the application out in January? Is that, okay, so it would be, it's not going to hold that up
It will
for
not
us to
hold
wait.
that
I was going to say, is there a way for us to do this online or anything like that? in between?
No,
Okay.
unfortunately, it's funny. We've checked in with the city attorney's office on whether we can, do, but it's unlike a nonprofit board because it's public meetings and decisions. Can't be online. We'll come back. We'll have many reasons to meet in January.
And I missed the agenda, but I do have a question of some things on it, which is our survey of the committee that we committed. Because I know we talked about that at co-chair.
As we close out
So
this meeting.
if it's okay that we can get an announcement on that before you end.
Thank you. Megan, as we close out this meeting, this was a wonderful reminder at 8:01 that we do have this, you all have an annual and part of just finishing out your working agreements was this annual survey, both of the committee as a whole, introspective, and then of the support that we're providing. And so that's something that we know we will get out to you all here shortly. So stay tuned for that. Okay. All right, y'all. Tracy, call it.
All right, that is it, everyone. Enjoy the evening. Have a great holiday and a peaceful holiday. Take care, everyone.
All right.
Thanks so much. Goodbye.
Right.